It was a moment that wasn't supposed to happen. A gesture so ingrained in the etiquette of golf, a handshake, was denied. And not just any handshake. At the height of the PGA Tour's civil war, with the sport fractured and bleeding, two of its biggest titans found themselves at the center of a storm. One was the legendary Tiger Woods, a man who had defined an era, and the other was Rory McIlroy, the heir apparent who was expected to carry the torch. The image shocked the world. But this wasn't just a petty snub on a practice green. It was the culmination of years of tension, fierce competition, broken trust, and a friendship tested by the ultimate betrayal. To understand why Rory McIlroy seemed to turn his back on his hero, you have to understand the high-stakes gamble they took together, the enemies they made, and the crushing moment that broke Rory's heart. This is the story of how the mentor and the protege, two men who vowed to save golf, ended up on opposite sides of a cold war that no one saw coming. The setting was the Memorial Tournament at Muirfield Village, a place steeped in golfing history. It is Jack Nicklaus's masterpiece, a course that demands respect and precision. The story, however, didn't unfold on the iconic 18th green, but in the quiet, tense environment of the practice range. The date was June 2026. On the surface, it was just another preparation day for the biggest names in golf. But the air was thick with history. As Rory McIlroy worked on his swing, the air was punctured by an approach that would send shockwaves through the golfing world. Tiger Woods walked over, a figure whose presence still commands the room, and offered a gesture of friendship or perhaps a professional courtesy. But McIlroy, who once admitted he was more nervous meeting Woods than Barack Obama, didn't extend his hand in return. McIlroy, the reigning Masters champion, remained focused on his practice, refusing to acknowledge the man he once called a hero. The snub was not a moment of ignorance. It was a calculated, public rejection. It was a moment that screamed louder than any press conference. It revealed a deep and painful rift that had been festering for years. This wasn't just a dispute between athletes. This was a fracture in the very soul of modern golf. The reaction was immediate. Speculation ran wild on social media. How could a young star snub the man who did more for the sport than almost anyone else? But those who had been paying close attention knew that this didn't come out of nowhere. This was the final, visible crack in a relationship that had become increasingly strained, a relationship that had once been the cornerstone of the PGA Tour's resistance to change. To understand the animosity, we have to go back to the beginning. We have to remember the admiration, the bond, and the alliance that turned this pair into the most powerful duo in the game. And then we have to remember how it all fell apart, leaving McIlroy feeling betrayed and alone. This was a story that started with a hero and ended with a heartbreak. To understand the sting of that cold shoulder at Muirfield Village, you have to go back to a time when Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy weren't just friendly competitors. They were the faces of a revolution, a united front against an existential threat to the sport they loved. For a generation, these two men represented the past and the future of golf. But when a Saudi-backed rival league threatened to tear it all apart, they became something more. They became brothers in arms. The bond started long before the millions and the majors. It began with admiration. McIlroy, a young prodigy from Northern Ireland, had grown up with Tiger Woods posters on his bedroom wall. In 2002, at just 13 years old, he watched Woods win the World Golf Championships in his native Ireland, cementing a lifelong idolization. It was the classic, I want to beat the best story, but it quickly evolved into something deeper. When McIlroy turned pro and signed with Nike in 2013, joining Woods as the face of the brand, the natural rivalry transformed into a genuine friendship. They were spotted laughing on practice greens, trading tips, and appearing in slick advertisements. McIlroy even revealed a quirky side to their friendship, once joking that Woods would send him bizarre texts at 4 in the morning because he couldn't sleep, a habit that reportedly got McIlroy in trouble with his wife. It was a unique, almost brotherly dynamic. But the real test of their relationship wasn't a late-night text. It was the arrival of LIV Golf. In 2022, the Saudi-backed breakaway league threatened to splinter the PGA Tour, throwing billions of dollars at players and creating a civil war in professional golf. Woods and McIlroy refused the money, famously leading the tour's defense. Woods turned down an estimated $800 million offer. They became the vocal leaders of the resistance, a powerful duo standing against the tide. They organized player meetings and refused to back down, even when their friends and peers defected. Their crusade against LIV wasn't just about loyalty, it was about legacy. They believed the PGA Tour was the rightful home of competitive golf, and the Saudi-backed upstarts were a threat to its integrity. To solidify their vision for the future, they became business partners, founding TMRW Sports and launching TGL, a tech-infused indoor golf league meant to revolutionize the sport. They were closer than ever. They had a common enemy, a shared purpose, and a business empire built on their partnership. It looked like nothing could break them. And then, everything changed. The enemy wasn't just outside the gates anymore. The cracks started forming from within. The bond between Woods and McIlroy had always seemed unbreakable. They were the two biggest stars in golf, locked together by rivalry, respect, and a shared vision for the sport's future. But as the battle against LIV Golf intensified, the first cracks began to appear. And they came not from an outside enemy, but from the weight of their own differing convictions. The year 2023 marked a turning point. Jon Rahm, the reigning Masters champion and one of the most vocal supporters of the PGA Tour, shocked the golfing world by defecting to LIV Golf. The reported $500 million deal was a body blow to the tour's resistance. For McIlroy, the betrayal hit hard. Rahm had been a friend and a Ryder Cup teammate. But instead of public condemnation, McIlroy did something that surprised everyone. He expressed understanding. "I was maybe a little judgmental of the guys who went to LIV Golf at the start," McIlroy admitted. "I think it was a bit of a mistake on my part because I now realize that not everyone is in my position or in Tiger Woods' position. We all turn professional to make a living playing the sports that we do." This was a seismic shift. The man who had been the most vocal critic of the breakaway league was now publicly questioning his own hardline stance. He argued that the ongoing discussions about a potential merger between the PGA Tour and LIV had legitimized the Saudi-backed circuit, making it easier for players like Rahm to jump ship without the same backlash. In McIlroy's view, Rahm was simply making a smart business move. Tiger Woods, however, saw things very differently. The five-time Masters champion was less forgiving. When Rahm reached out to Woods to explain his decision, the response was silence. The cold shoulder was telling. Woods, a man of fierce loyalty and unwavering principles, viewed the defection as a betrayal of everything they had fought for. He was not ready to welcome the prodigal son back with open arms. The rift between the two leaders was now visible to the world. McIlroy was softening, seeking peace and reconciliation. Woods was standing firm, drawing a line in the sand. Their once united front was beginning to splinter. But the real test was yet to come. The breaking point would not be about an outsider like Rahm. It would be about power, control, and a seat at the table. It would be about the very board they had created to save the tour. By the spring of 2024, the golf world was holding its breath. The PGA Tour and the Saudi Public Investment Fund were locked in secret negotiations, trying to finalize a deal that would reunite the sport. But the real battle wasn't happening in boardrooms with suits and lawyers. It was happening among the players themselves. And at the center of it was a power struggle that would officially tear Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy apart. In November 2023, McIlroy had resigned from the PGA Tour's policy board, the powerful group of players who helped steer the tour's future. He was exhausted. He later admitted the responsibilities were not what I signed up for, and the sport had been in flux for 2 years because of LIV. He walked away, and his seat was taken by Jordan Spieth. But then McIlroy changed his mind. By early 2024, he was watching the negotiations from the sidelines, and he didn't like what he saw. He believed the tour needed his voice back at the table. He told reporters, "I think I can be helpful. I don't think there's been much progress made in the last 8 months." So a plan was hatched. Webb Simpson, a veteran player on the board, offered to step down from his seat on one condition, that McIlroy would take his place. It seemed like a simple administrative move. It was anything but. When the other player directors gathered to vote, the room split. According to reports, the vote was 3-2 against McIlroy's reinstatement. And the man leading the opposition? Tiger Woods. The legend, the mentor, the business partner, had reportedly voted to keep his friend off the board. The news hit the golf world like a thunderbolt. The public face of the PGA Tour's resistance to LIV had just been rejected by his own peers. with his closest ally holding the knife. McIlroy tried to downplay the rift. He insisted there was no strain on his friendship with Woods, saying, "I think friends can have disagreements or not see eye to eye on things." He admitted the process had become pretty complicated and pretty messy, and that it had opened up some old wounds and scar tissue. But he also revealed something more telling. He acknowledged that there was a subset of people on the board that were maybe uncomfortable with me coming back on for some reason. The underlying message was clear. Tiger Woods was one of the people who was uncomfortable. The reason for the block was about more than just procedure. It was a clash of visions. McIlroy, once the fiercest critic of LIV, had shifted his stance. He was now advocating for peace, for a deal, for unification. He had come to believe that the situation is not sustainable. Woods, however, was standing firm. With a massive new investment deal from the Strategic Sports Group, Woods told the world, "Financially, we don't need that right now." He wasn't ready to welcome the Saudis with open arms. He was still fighting. The war was no longer between the PGA Tour and LIV. It was between Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy, and it was only going to get worse. By the summer of 2024, the golf world had become obsessed with the growing tension between Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy. The boardroom vote had been a shock, but it was the aftermath that truly revealed the depth of the fracture. For the first time, the two icons were publicly at odds, and their differing visions for the future of golf were on full display. McIlroy had been surprisingly candid about his desire to return to the policy board. He believed the negotiations with the Saudi Public Investment Fund were stalling, and he felt his voice was needed. When the vote went against him, he didn't hide his frustration. He admitted the process had opened up some old wounds and scar tissue from things that have happened before. He also acknowledged that a subset of people on the board were maybe uncomfortable with me coming back on for some reason. That subset reportedly included Woods, who had voted against his friend's reinstatement. But McIlroy publicly denied that their friendship had soured. "I think friends can have disagreements or not see eye to eye on things," he told reporters. He insisted that the two had spoken for 45 minutes the previous Friday and that there was no strain. "I think we might see the future of golf a little bit differently," he admitted. "But I don't think that should place any strain on a relationship or on a friendship." It was a diplomatic answer, but it couldn't hide the truth. The two most powerful men in golf were no longer on the same page. McIlroy, once the fiercest critic of LIV, had become a peacemaker. He was advocating for a deal, for reunification, for a way to bring the sport back together. Woods, on the other hand, was standing firm. Reports suggested he believed the PGA Tour was in a strong enough financial position and didn't need to rush into a deal with the Saudis. The Associated Press added another layer to the drama, reporting that Woods was set to be the only player directly negotiating with the Saudis. The power had shifted, and McIlroy was on the outside looking in. The irony was painful. These were the two men who had started the fight against LIV together. They had been the faces of the resistance, the voices of loyalty, the architects of the future. Now, they were on opposite sides of the very peace they once fought to prevent.